I've been following AI news pretty obsessively, and every so often a story lands that makes you reread the first paragraph. This past week handed me 4 of those stories. Beijing is now openly weighing whether to lock the rest of the world out of its best AI models. China's own cyber authority has publicly branded an American coding tool a security backdoor. DeepSeek is building its own chip, and on July 15th, millions of Chinese users are gonna open their favorite app and find their AI companion simply gone. Any of those is a headline. Stacked together, they look like the opening moves of an AI Cold War, and I want to walk you through all of it because the pieces only make sense sitting next to each other. Stick around to the end because I'll tell you why I think this is actually one of the most interesting and most encouraging stories in tech right now, even if every headline screams the opposite. And if you like AI news that gets to the point, hit subscribe because it really does help me keep making sense. Starting with the big one. On July 7th, Reuters reported that Chinese authorities had spent the previous month meeting with the country's top AI companies about restricting overseas access to their most advanced models, including ones that are not yet released. In the room, according to 3 people familiar with the talks, Alibaba, ByteDance, and the startup Z.AI. The meeting was led by China's Ministry of Commerce. Here's the part that made me sit up though. The restrictions on the table cover closed models and open way ones, the freely downloadable systems that made Chinese AI famous in the first place. Officials also floated making the leak or theft of proprietary AI technology an offense under China's national security law, plus limits on which investors are allowed to fund domestic AI startups. Nothing has been decided yet, and Reuters was careful about that. The scope is still being argued over, and any curbs might apply only to future models, and there's no timeline, but the direction of travel is hard to misread. Think about what this would undo. Since DeepSeek R1 landed in January 2025, Chinese labs have basically been handing over their work for free. Qwen built a massive following on Hugging Face. Doubao became the most used AI product inside of China. Z.AI's GLM 5.2 has American researchers buzzing because it gets close to top US models at a fraction of the cost. That openness was the whole strategy. It bought global mindshare, developer loyalty, and a real seat at the table. Now, Beijing is asking whether it still wants to give that away. And if you run a company that quietly swapped in a Chinese model to slash your inference bill, this is your problem too. The second thread is messier and kind of wild. A developer noticed that Anthropic had slipped code into Claude Code that tried to figure out whether the user was in China or connected to a Chinese AI lab, reading signals like time zone and network addresses. An Anthropic engineer confirmed it publicly, saying that the code went in back in March to fight distillation and was being pulled. Quick definition. Distillation is using a strong model's output to train a weaker model, and Anthropic claims Chinese labs have been doing this at industrial scales. In June, it sent a letter to 2 US senators accusing Alibaba and its Qwen lab of generating 28.8 million exchanges with Claude through roughly 25,000 fraudulent accounts between April 22nd and June 5th. China's response was not subtle. On July 8th, the National Vulnerability Database, run by China's Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, announced that Claude Code contains a security backdrop posing a serious threat. It named versions 2.1.91 through 2.1.196 and told users to uninstall or upgrade immediately. Alibaba has already banned Claude Code internally from July 10th, telling staff to switch to its own platform, Quoter. Anthropic's answer was basically a shrug. It said the code was an experimental anti-abuse measure and pointed out that Claude isn't licensed for use in China anyway, so a national government is issuing a formal security advisory about an American AI product that officially isn't even sold there. That's not a software dispute, that's statecraft. Now the story I think is being wildly underrated. On July 15th, ByteDance, Douban, and Alibaba's Qwen are switching off user-created AI agents, not tweaking them, switching them off. The trigger is China's interim measures of the Administration of AI Anthropomorphic Interaction Services. That's a mouthful, issued in April by the Cyberspace Administration along with 4 other agencies effective July 15th. The rules target AI that simulates human personality for sustained emotional interaction, with especially hard limits around minors and virtual intimacy. Douban users get read-only access to their old agents until October 15th, and then the data is gone. Qwen users got even less. Tencent's Yuanhua quietly pulled a similar feature back in June. Now, if you read the headlines fast, it looks like China is banning AI agent, but it isn't. Your customer service bot is fine, your coding assistant is fine. Beijing went after the agent that keeps you company, and the reason both companies kill the whole feature instead of patching it is telling. The rules require anti-addiction systems, usage notifications, and instant exit mechanisms, and none of that fits into a product built to remember you and stay in character forever. Here's my honest take, and I know it's not popular. Some versions of this is coming everywhere, and I don't hate it. The research on emotional attachment to chatbots makes for uncomfortable reading. California is fumbling toward the same problem with the SB 243. Beijing just moved first and moved hard. The execution is heavy-handed, sure, and it's bundled with the content control nobody outside of China should import, but the underlying question, whether software should be allowed to engineer dependence on itself, is a fair one, and I'd rather we wrestle with it now than in 10 years. Same day as the export story, Reuters dropped another exclusive. DeepSeek is developing its own AI chip. It's an inference chip and not a training chip. Inference is what runs every single time somebody actually uses your model, and it's where the compute bill balloons as a product gets popular. The effort started about a year ago, so it's still early, and DeepSeek has been quietly hiring chip engineers without posting the jobs publicly while taking to design firms, foundries, and memory suppliers. NVIDIA shares slipped about 1.6% in pre-market trading on the news, which tells you how twitchy the market actually is. But look at who DeepSeek is rooting around. Not just NVIDIA, which export controls already blocked. Huawei too. DeepSeek trained V4 on Huawei's Ascend hardware, and now it wants out from under that as well. This is a company that has decided dependence on anybody is a liability. Will it work? That's unclear. Designing a competitive AI chip takes years and serious money, and US rules cut China off from leading-edge foundries and high-bandwidth memory. Analyst Richard Winsder put it bluntly, saying DeepSeek has almost no chance of selling silicon outside of China without access to leading-edge manufacturing. The real tell will be which factory agrees to build the thing. And notice DeepSeek isn't alone. OpenAI just unveiled Jalapeno with Broadcom. Anthropic has been weighing its own processors, and Google, Amazon, and Microsoft have been at this for years. Custom silicon is table stakes now. And then, right in the middle of all of this gloom, something genuinely cool showed up. A Chinese team from Moxon Technology working with academician Pan Yunhei's group at Zhejiang University released MoWorld, which they call a flash world model. It generates a real-time interactive world at up to 50 frames per second, and most world models today crawl at 5 or 10. You steer it conventionally, WASD, and a mouse at 1080p with full 6-degree camera freedom. The kicker? No NVIDIA GPU. None. The entire pipeline from data and pre-training through distillation and inference was rebuilt around domestic NPUs, with the 14 billion parameter mixture of experts model hitting those frame rates on Huawei Ascend hardware. They claim inference costs land around 70% below comparable GPU settings. I want to stay careful because these are company claims and benchmarks deserving a squint, but if it holds up, that's a real achievement, and it's what tends to happen when you cut somebody off from the easy path. They go find a harder one. Okay, I know how all of this sounds, but let's not pretend that the US is the open-hearted one here. In June, Washington slapped export controls on Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos 5, which forced the company to disable them for everybody on the planet since it couldn't verify nationality in real time. Commerce lifted those controls on June 30th, and Fable 5 came back on July 1st. Anthropic then extended free promotional access through July 12th while working on efficiency, which reads to me like a play to hold developer attention. OpenAI got the same treatment, and GPT 5.6 first went out to a small group of trusted partners under government pressure, and only went fully public on July 9th with the Solterra and Luna variants. So America gates its frontier models on national security grounds. China gates its frontier model on national security grounds, and both sides point across the ocean and call the other one the threat. Symmetry is a hell of a thing. Now here's what I think. The phrase Cold War gets thrown around lazily, but the shape definitely fits. Two blocks, each treating a technology as a strategic national asset, each building a parallel stack, each accusing the other of stealing. The open era of AI, where a lab in Hangzhou drops weights on a Friday and a founder in Ohio has a product by Monday, isn't dead, but it's under some serious pressure. And yet, I'm somehow weirdly optimistic. Why? Because competition at this intensity produces an absurd amount of progress. Export controls were supposed to freeze China's AI industry, and instead we got R1, Quen, GLM, and now a 50 FPS world model running on chips America said they couldn't have. Meanwhile, American labs are shipping faster than ever, and nobody is coasting. Nobody can afford to coast. The thing to actually watch isn't who wins, it's whether the open weight lane survives the crossfire, because that lane is the reason the rest of us got to participate at all. Right now, it's struck between two governments that both find it inconvenient. I bet on it surviving. Too many people have built too much on top of it for it to just disappear. And if any of that was useful, a like genuinely helps push this to more people. And subscribe if you want to see the next one, because at the pace this thing is moving, there will absolutely be a next one by Thursday. I'll see you in it.